can you ever really trust someone you love? That question echoed in Camille Turner's mind as she stood alone in her kitchen, the digital clock glowing 11:32 p.m. and the soft patter of Portland rain tapping rhythmically against the window. She gripped her mug of chamomile tea a little too tightly, barely noticing the steam swirling up and dissipating into the dim light. The kitchen was cozy but lived in, with a stack of unopened mail on the counter and a half-assembled grocery list penned in her rounded handwriting. The hum of the refrigerator and the persistent drizzle outside were the only sounds breaking the silence, but inside Camille's head, thoughts tumbled over each other, refusing to settle. Camille had always been the steady one among her friends, the reliable confidant, the one who planned ahead, who never forgot birthdays or anniversaries. At 33, she'd built a life that, from the outside, looked comforting in its predictability. Her job as a marketing analyst at a boutique firm downtown kept her days full and her mind focused. She loved the routine, morning jogs along the Willamette River, coffee with Ethan before work, debates about which indie band would break out next, weekend trips to the farmer's market. Hers was a life of small rituals and quiet joys, anchored by her marriage to Ethan Turner, a man whose easy charisma and quick wit had drawn her in from their very first conversation at a friend's game night 6 years ago. But lately, the foundation of that life felt shaky. It was nothing dramatic at first, just little things, subtle shifts she tried to brush off as products of stress or the ebb and flow of any long-term relationship. Ethan had been busier at work, sometimes distracted, often more tired. He'd started coming home later, offering vague explanations about deadlines and team meetings. Their conversations, once effortless, now occasionally stalled. He would smile, but sometimes it seemed like he was only half there. Tonight, those worries had hardened into something sharper. The catalyst had been so ordinary, so accidental, that Camille almost laughed at herself for how much it rattled her. She'd been looking for her phone to check a recipe, and in the rush of prepping dinner, she'd picked up Ethan's device by mistake. The screen lit up with a new message, Sophie L., followed by 3 laughing emojis and a string of inside jokes she couldn't decipher. The words were harmless on the surface, banter about a meme, a comment about next time. But the tone was intimate, familiar in a way that felt outside the boundaries of casual friendship. Camille's heart had thudded uncomfortably as she stared at the phone. She knew Ethan's passcode. There were no secrets, or so she'd believed. But standing there, the weight of the question pressed down. Should she look? Was it a violation of trust or a necessary act of self-preservation? Her thumb hovered over the screen, torn between the desire not to know and the fear of what she might find. In the end, curiosity, or maybe anxiety, won out. She unlocked the phone, telling herself she'd only look at that one conversation. The chat history between Ethan and Sophie stretched back for months. Late-night messages, shared complaints about work, jokes about colleagues, references to things Camille didn't recognize. There were memes and gifs, casual plans to grab drinks, and the kind of back and forth that implied a closeness she'd never heard about before. Nothing explicit, nothing that screamed betrayal, but an unmistakable sense of intimacy, a shorthand that comes from long hours spent together, a comfort that seemed to edge just past the line of what Camille had always considered appropriate. She closed the app, hands trembling, and set the phone back on the counter as if it might burn her. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air denser. Camille pressed her palm to her forehead and tried to steady her breath. She told herself that it was probably nothing, that she was overreacting, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already taking root. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur. Ethan came home just after 9, rainwater beading on his jacket, his eyes tired but warm as he greeted her. They talked over takeout, Thai noodles and spring rolls, making small talk about their days. Camille watched him closely, searching for signs, for any tells that might reveal what was really going on. But Ethan was his usual self. Attentive, funny, teasing her about her obsession with true crime podcasts. She tried to match his energy, to laugh at the right moments, to act normal. Inside, though, she was miles away. Every detail of their conversation filtered through the lens of what she'd seen. Later, after Ethan went to the bedroom to take a call, he said it was work, another late-night issue. Camille sat alone at the kitchen table, the remains of dinner growing cold. She twisted her wedding ring absent-mindedly, replaying the messages in her mind. Was this how it started? Not with a dramatic confession or a secret rendezvous, but with a slow drift, a series of small betrayals wrapped up in everyday life. She thought back to the early days of their relationship. Long walks in Forest Park, lazy Sunday mornings in bed, the certainty she'd always felt that she could trust Ethan with anything. That certainty now felt distant, replaced by a gnawing anxiety she couldn't shake. Sleep was impossible. Camille lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain and the distant hum of traffic. She tried to reason with herself, tried to list all the ways in which Ethan had proven his love and loyalty over the years. But the images from his phone kept intruding. Sophie's name, the late-night jokes, the easy familiarity. She wondered if Ethan noticed her distance, if he could sense the shift in her mood. She wondered if she was imagining things, if she was letting her fears get the best of her. But then she remembered the way he'd started keeping his phone face down, how he'd begun taking calls in the other room, how he'd brushed off her questions about his new project at work. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of Portland day that seemed to seep into your bones. Camille moved through her routine on autopilot: shower, coffee, a half-hearted attempt at breakfast. Ethan was already dressed, scrolling through emails at the counter. He glanced up as she entered, offering a tired smile. "Morning, Cam. You sleep okay?" She nodded, forcing a smile, and poured herself coffee, watching the cream swirl and settle. They talked about the news, the forecast, the traffic on I-5, safe topics, familiar rhythms. But the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable, at least to Camille. She caught herself watching Ethan's hands as he typed, the way he glanced at his phone when it buzzed. She wanted to ask him right then, about Sophie, about the messages, about everything. But the words caught in her throat. What if she was wrong? What if she pushed too hard and made things worse? What if the truth was exactly what she feared? At work, Camille found it hard to focus. The open office buzzed with the usual chatter, but her mind drifted. She replayed the messages in her head, analyzing every word, every emoji, every timestamp. She scrolled through her own texts with Ethan, comparing their tone, searching for signs of change. At lunch, she sat in a quiet corner of her favorite cafe, rain streaking the windows, trying to convince herself that it was just work stress, that she was reading too much into things. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at her concentration, making her jump every time her phone vibrated. That evening, as she cooked dinner, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary, Camille rehearsed what she might say. She pictured herself asking calmly, rationally, without accusation. She imagined Ethan laughing it off, reassuring her, making her feel silly for worrying. But she also imagined him getting defensive, shutting down, confirming her worst fears. Each scenario played out in her mind, escalating until she could barely breathe. When Ethan came home, the tension between them was palpable. He kissed her cheek, asked about her day, commented on the smell of dinner. Camille nodded and smiled, but her answers were clipped, her eyes darting to his phone every time it buzzed. Finally, after dinner, as they loaded the dishwasher together, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She dried her hands on a dish towel, heart pounding, and turned to him. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up, surprised by her tone, concern flickering across his face. "Of course," he said, setting down a plate and leaning against the counter. She hesitated, searching his face for any hint of what was coming. "Who's Sophie?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I saw some messages on your phone last night. It seemed like you two are close." For a moment, Ethan didn't say anything. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Then he ran a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. "She's just a friend from work," he said, his voice measured but tense. "We've been working together on a new app. Sometimes we joke around. That's all it is, Cam. I promise." Camille searched his eyes, wanting to believe him, wanting to feel the relief she so desperately craved. But something in his tone, a defensiveness, a guardedness she hadn't heard before, kept her on edge. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and turned back to the dishes. Ethan lingered for a moment, watching her, before heading to the living room, phone in hand. As she finished cleaning up, Camille felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching her own life through frosted glass. The question that had haunted her all night returned, sharper than ever. Could she really trust Ethan? Or had something fundamental shifted between them, something she couldn't name but couldn't ignore? She dried her hands, glanced at the rain-streaked window, and made a silent promise to herself. She would find out the truth, one way or another. The uncertainty was unbearable, but facing it felt like the only way forward. The next morning, Camille woke to the sound of rain drumming steadily against the bedroom window. The clock read 6:12 a.m., earlier than usual, but she knew sleep wouldn't return. Ethan's side of the bed was empty, the covers still warm. She heard his muffled voice from the hallway, speaking in a low tone, and her chest tightened. He was on the phone again, too early for a casual call. She lay still, listening, heart pounding. She caught fragments. Work, deliverable. Let me check the timeline. The call ended, and a moment later Ethan appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, hair damp from a quick shower. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile. "Did I wake you?" Camille shook her head. "No, just couldn't sleep. Big day ahead?" He nodded, grabbing his messenger bag. "Yeah, sort of. We're behind on that launch. I might be late tonight." She studied his face, searching for signs of guilt, of relief, of anything. But he was already shifting his gaze to his phone, tapping out a reply. She wanted to ask about Sophie right then, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile, wished him luck, and watched him disappear down the hallway. She sat up, staring at the rain outside, the gray sky reflecting her mood. The kitchen felt empty and cold as she poured herself coffee, the silence in the house pressing in. She replayed their conversation from the night before, picking apart every word, every hesitation. Maybe she was reading too much into things, or maybe not enough. At work, Camille struggled to concentrate. Her open-plan office was a blur of conversations and clacking keyboards, the smell of burnt coffee and printer ink oddly comforting. She tried to lose herself in data reports, but her mind wandered back to Ethan's phone, to the playful emojis and the inside jokes with Sophie. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her jittery and distracted. Marissa, her closest friend at the office, noticed immediately. At lunchtime, she slid into the seat across from Camille in the company break room, her expression both concerned and curious. "You look like you haven't slept in days. Want to talk about it?" Camille hesitated, glancing around at the busy lunch crowd. She lowered her voice. "I found messages on Ethan's phone, from someone named Sophie. He says she's just a friend, but I don't know." The messages felt different. There were all these late-night conversations, jokes I didn't get. Marissa listened, sipping her tea, her face serious. "Did you ask him about it?" "I tried. He said I was overthinking, that they're just friends from work. But he's been so distant lately. Secretive." Marissa put her cup down gently. "Camille, I know how much you love him, but you can't drive yourself crazy over this. If something's going on, you'll find out eventually. But don't let it eat you alive in the meantime. Maybe he's just stressed at work." Camille nodded uncertainly, grateful for Marissa's calm, pragmatic advice. But the doubt lingered, heavier now that she'd spoken the words out loud. That afternoon, as gray clouds drifted past the office windows, Camille's thoughts kept circling back to Ethan. She texted him a simple, "Hope your day's going okay," and stared at the screen, waiting for the typing bubble to appear. Minutes passed. Nothing. He always replied right away, except lately. When she returned home that evening, the house felt even emptier than before. Ethan's shoes were by the door, but he was nowhere to be seen. She found him in the study, hunched over his laptop, a spreadsheet open and headphones on. He looked up when she entered, his eyes guarded. "Hey, sorry, I'm swamped. Can we do dinner later?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the screen. She nodded. "Of course." She retreated to the kitchen, trying to shake the feeling that she was intruding. She reheated leftovers and ate alone at the small table, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tapping of Ethan's keyboard. It was a routine that had crept up on her. Two people living side by side, their conversations thinning, their silences growing. The next morning, as she left for work, Ethan stopped her at the door. "Hey, I'm sorry about last night. I'm just under a lot of pressure right now. Big deadline coming up." Camille forced a smile. "I get it. Let me know if you want to talk." He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but the gesture felt automatic. She watched him as she walked to her car, the weight of unspoken words stretching between them. The days blurred together, each one marked by small slights, a last-minute canceled dinner, Ethan stepping out to take calls, his phone always face down on the table. She began to notice things she'd once ignored, the way he flinched when she reached for his phone, the careful vagueness in his explanations, the subtle defensiveness in his tone. One evening, desperate for clarity, Camille scrolled through Ethan's social media accounts, searching for any trace of Sophie. There she was, Sophie L., her profile filled with group photos from office parties, hikes, and happy hour gatherings. Camille's stomach twisted when she saw Ethan tagged in several of them. In one, taken at a trendy downtown bar, Ethan and Sophie stood side by side, laughing, drinks in hand. The timestamp matched one of the nights Ethan had claimed to be working late. She stared at the photo, her heart racing. The caption read, "Best team ever, late nights and lots of laughs." Comments underneath were filled with inside jokes and banter. Camille scanned them for clues, her mind racing. That night, as Ethan slept beside her, Camille lay awake, replaying every interaction, every conversation. She thought of their early years together, their spontaneous road trips, their whispered jokes in the dark, the quiet comfort of knowing he was hers. She wondered when things had changed, when the certainty had been replaced by doubt. Unable to sleep, she got up and wandered to the living room. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. She sat by the window, hugging her knees to her chest, and tried to sort through her tangled emotions: anger, sadness, hope, fear. Was she being paranoid? Or was her intuition warning her of something real? The next day, Camille's anxiety began to take a toll at work. She missed a deadline for the first time in months, her focus shattered by intrusive thoughts. During an afternoon meeting, her manager, Leslie, pulled her aside. "Is everything okay? You haven't seemed like yourself lately." Camille hesitated, torn between honesty and privacy. "Just some things at home. I'll be fine." Leslie nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "If you need time or someone to talk to, let me know. We care about you here." The kindness stung, making Camille realize just how alone she felt. She left work early and walked through downtown Portland, the city damp and alive with the scent of wet pavement and coffee. She wandered into her favorite bookstore, letting the quiet hush of pages and soft jazz soothe her nerves. But even there, she couldn't escape the gnawing uncertainty. That evening, she tried to talk to Ethan again. After dinner, she sat across from him at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Ethan, can we talk?" Her voice trembled. He looked up, wary. "About what?" "About Sophie. About us." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I need to understand. I saw the photos, the late-night texts. I need you to be honest with me." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Camille, I told you, there's nothing going on. Sophie and I are friends, we work together. That's it. You have to trust me." Camille blinked back tears, frustration building. I want to. But you've been distant, secretive. You're not the same. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. I'm stressed, okay? Work is overwhelming. I can't deal with this right now. She watched him leave the room, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Camille sat alone at the table, her hands clenched. The urge to find answers herself grew stronger. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Marissa. What would you do if you were in my place? The reply came quickly. I'd want the truth. But be careful, Cam. Sometimes digging makes things worse. Camille stared at the screen, weighing her options. She could confront Ethan again, but the conversation would only spiral. Or she could try to reach out to Sophie herself, risk embarrassment, risk hearing something she didn't want to know. Restless, she scrolled through her own photos, past snapshots of happier days, picnics, birthdays, weekends at the coast. She found herself longing for the simplicity of those times before suspicion had crept in. The next morning, Camille woke to a new message on her phone. It was from Ethan, sent during the night. I'm sorry about last night. I love you. We'll talk soon. The words were meant to reassure, but instead they filled her with dread. What was he hiding? Why couldn't he just tell her the truth? She resolved to find out. That afternoon, after work, she looked up Sophie's contact information. Her hands shook as she typed out a message. Hi, Sophie. This is Camille, Ethan's wife. Could we talk for a moment? She hesitated before hitting send, her heart hammering in her chest. The message was gone now. Out in the world, impossible to take back. She spent the evening waiting, checking her phone every few minutes. Hours passed with no reply. The uncertainty was almost unbearable, every moment stretching on forever. Late that night, just as she was about to give up, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophie. Hi, Camille? Sure, I can talk. What's on your mind? Camille's breath caught. She stared at the screen, weighing her next move. The truth, whatever it was, felt closer than ever, but the cost of learning it might be more than she was ready to pay. If you're finding Camille's story as gripping as I am, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The truth is just around the corner, and it's about to change everything. Camille's fingers hovered over her phone, her heart thudding so loudly she was sure she could hear it echoing in the quiet house. Sophie's reply was polite, open, almost casual in tone, but Camille felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. She typed, erased, and retyped her message 3 times before finally hitting send. Hi, Sophie. This might sound strange, but I've noticed you and Ethan have gotten pretty close lately. I hope you don't mind me asking, but is there something going on between you two that I should know about? The minutes that followed were some of the longest of Camille's life. She paced the kitchen, glancing out at the rain-soaked backyard, her mind racing through every possible outcome. Would Sophie take offense? Would she laugh? Would she confirm Camille's worst fears? The silence was oppressive, her anxiety prickling along her skin. Finally, her phone buzzed again. Hey, Camille, I totally get why you'd ask. Ethan and I have been working together on a pretty big project at work, and I guess we've gotten close because of that. But I promise you, there's nothing going on between us outside work. He talks about you all the time, actually. If you want, we can chat in person. I'd rather clear the air than let there be any weirdness. The relief was like a slow, cautious thaw. Camille wanted to believe Sophie, but the memory of that selfie and the secrecy still weighed on her. She hesitated only a moment before replying. I'd appreciate meeting. Maybe tomorrow after work? Sophie agreed without hesitation, suggesting a cafe downtown. Camille's night was restless. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed snippets of messages, Ethan's distracted smile, the look in his eyes lately. She lay awake long after Ethan had come to bed, listening to his steady breathing, wondering how things had gotten so tangled between them. The next day, the city was shrouded in a damp, gray mist as Camille made her way to the cafe. She arrived early, choosing a table by the window where she could see the street and have a moment to collect herself. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the soft hum of conversation. Camille clasped her mug, her palms sweating despite the chill in the air. When Sophie walked in, she was instantly recognizable, tall, with a confident stride and a quick, genuine smile. She wore a navy raincoat, drops of water clinging to her hair, and waved as she spotted Camille. "Hey, thanks for meeting me," Sophie said, sliding into the seat opposite. Her voice was friendly, but Camille noticed a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. "I hope this isn't too awkward." Camille shook her head. "No, I just needed to hear things straight from you. I'm sorry if I came across as suspicious or paranoid." Sophie smiled, her expression softening. "You're not. Honestly, if the roles were reversed, I'd probably be asking the same questions." She pulled her phone from her bag and set it on the table. "Look, I know this probably looked bad. Ethan was adamant about keeping this project under wraps until we had something concrete to show. He didn't even want to tell you until it was finalized because he wanted it to be a surprise. He's been working on a new app with our team, something he's really proud of, and I've been helping with the design." Camille's mind whirred, remembering the late nights, the secretive messages, the inside jokes. So all those texts were mostly about the project, or us venting about work, Sophie finished, unlocking her phone and scrolling through messages. She turned the screen toward Camille, showing her a string of conversations, screenshots of wireframes, discussions about code, complaints about tight deadlines. "I know how it must have looked, but there's nothing romantic here. Ethan's crazy about you, Camille. He talks about your anniversary trip, the dinners you make, even the way you organize your spice rack alphabetically." A laugh escaped Camille, surprising her with its suddenness. The tension in her shoulders eased a fraction. "That's oddly specific." Sophie grinned. "He's a detail guy. Look, I get it. He should have been honest with you about what was going on, but he just wanted it to be perfect before sharing. I hope this clears things up." Camille's relief was tangible, but so was a lingering ache. She realized that while her worst fears hadn't come true, the secrecy had left its own mark. "Thank you, Sophie," she said quietly. "I really appreciate your honesty." They chatted for a few more minutes, the conversation slowly shifting from awkward explanations to small talk. When Sophie finally stood to leave, she touched Camille's arm lightly. "He loves you. Just talk to him, okay?" Camille nodded, watching Sophie disappear into the misty street. She sat for a moment longer, letting the reality of the conversation settle over her. The truth was both lighter and heavier than she'd imagined. It wasn't betrayal, but it wasn't nothing either. That evening, Camille returned home determined to talk to Ethan. Not with accusations, but with honesty about how the past weeks had made her feel. She found him in the living room, laptop open, a look of concentration on his face. As she sat beside him, he glanced up, the tension in his eyes unmistakable. "Hey," she began softly. "Can we talk for a minute?" He closed his laptop, setting it aside. "Of course. Is everything okay?" She took a steadying breath. "I met with Sophie today. I know about the project you two are working on." She explained everything. Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to guilt. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "I'm sorry, Camille. I should have told you sooner. I wanted it to be this big reveal, you know? Something to make you proud. But I can see now how that must have looked. It did look bad," Camille admitted, twisting her wedding ring. "I didn't know what to think. I was scared. And honestly, I felt like you were shutting me out." Ethan reached over, taking her hands in his. "I never meant to. I got so wrapped up in this idea of surprising you that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you in the process." "You mean everything to me, Camille. I don't want there to be secrets between us." She looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity, and found it. The same warmth and steadiness that had drawn her to him years ago. I want to trust you, Ethan. But I need you to be honest with me, even about the small things. He nodded, squeezing her hands. I promise. No more secrets. Not about work. Not about anything. They sat together in silence for a moment, the rain tapping softly at the windows, the city beyond their walls blurred and distant. Camille felt the weight in her chest begin to lift, replaced by something gentler. Hope, maybe, or the slow rebuilding of trust. Ethan pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. I love you, he whispered. I love you too, she replied, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. That night, they talked long into the evening, about work, about their fears, about what they wanted for their future. They laughed over old memories, shared their insecurities, and promised to always make space for honesty, even when it felt uncomfortable. As Camille drifted off to sleep beside Ethan, she realized that trust wasn't a thing you found once and for all. It was something you built, day by day, through small acts of faith and understanding. The fear hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled her. She felt stronger, more certain in herself, and in their ability to weather whatever storms might come. If you found Camille's journey as moving as I did, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment about a time you had to rebuild trust in your own life, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. And remember, sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that bring us closer together. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.